You ever come home from serving your country only to be told by your own family that you don't belong anymore? That the house your grandfather built, the one you were promised, now belongs to someone else. And somehow, that someone is your sister. I wasn't prepared for betrayal on the home front, but what they didn't know is that I spent 25 years tracking lies for a living. And this time, the target was personal. My name is Grace Ellison. I served in US Cyber Command for over 2 decades. I wasn't infantry. I didn't kick down doors or rappel out of helicopters. But I was the one who made sure those doors got kicked for the right reasons. I intercepted chatter, traced ransomware groups to their root servers, and testified in more closed-door briefings than I can count. I spent my life in the background, making sure the country was safe. So maybe that's why I never saw it coming when my own family became the threat. It was early October when I came back to Detroit, honorably discharged, pension in hand, 2 duffel bags and a dusty laptop. My grandfather's house was supposed to be my landing pad. It's where I learned Morse code as a kid, where I watched 4th of July fireworks from the roof, where I buried time capsules under the hydrangeas with my sister when we still liked each other. But when I showed up at the front gate, all I got was a buzzer and a voice. "You don't live here anymore, Grace. Turn around." It was my sister, Allison, cold, flat, like I was an Amazon package she didn't order. I stood there, stunned, still in uniform, still exhausted from 3 straight flights. "I just want to see Mom," I said. "She doesn't want to see you, and neither does Dad. And for the record, you're not in the will." That's when I noticed the sign in the yard. The private listing, Raven Elm Holdings, LLC. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't agreed to sell. But there it was. My grandfather's home, listed by a company I'd never heard of. Before I could even step onto the porch, the police were there. One officer recognized me, I think. He hesitated, saw the stripes on my shoulder. But that didn't stop them from saying it. "You have no legal claim to this property, Mom." And just like that, I became a trespasser in my own story. I didn't sleep that night. Parked 2 blocks away in a rented Toyota. My coat zipped to my chin. I stared at the windows, waiting to wake up from a dream. The porch light flickered once, then went dark. It felt like someone turned off my childhood. The next morning, I met with an old college friend, Monica Blair. She had gone the law school route, quiet, precise, and dangerous in a courtroom. We hadn't talked in years, but when she saw me standing there, she didn't even ask how I'd been. Just flipped open her iPad and said, "Thought you'd want to see this." She pulled up a deed transfer, 1450 Pinehurst Drive, listed under Raven Elm Holdings, LLC. Seller, Grace Ellison. Signature, not mine. "What the hell is this?" I asked. "It's fraud," she said, calm as a storm wall. "The notary listed on this form, suspended for falsifying vehicle titles last year. Same signature appears here." I stared at the screen. They planned this. They executed it fast and clean, Monica replied. And suddenly, the mission had a name. See, here's something they didn't teach in basic training, but I learned it anyway. Paper trails are more dangerous than bullets. We started pulling records, digital signatures, title filings, utility changes, even homeowners association filings. A month before the deed change, a new will had been submitted to probate court. This one gave everything to Allison and my father. That's when the nausea hit. My grandfather left the house to me, I said. He told me the day before he died. Monica nodded. Then we find the original. Anything. Emails, a letter, a journal entry. I remembered his old camcorder. We used to film backyard interviews, pretending to be on CNN. I knew there were tapes. Somewhere. If we can prove the new will conflicts with previous statements, she said, we can contest. But we'll need more. That night, I did something I hadn't done since Afghanistan. I ran surveillance. I parked behind the old pharmacy and watched the house. At 11:07 p.m., 2 unmarked vans rolled up the back alley. No headlights, no sound. Just shadows. 4 men stepped out, one of them tall, wearing gloves. I didn't see their faces, but I knew one of those guys was my sister's husband, Scott. He was a logistics manager for an international shipping firm, had a military background, always vague about what exactly he did. Said things like contracts and compliance, never specifics. I recorded the whole thing on a GoPro clipped to my hoodie. What were they unloading into a suburban basement at midnight? What needed to be kept that quiet? The next morning, Monica pulled power records for the house. Usage spikes at 2 a.m., industrial levels. No permits, no HVAC upgrades, nothing on file, she said. But they're running something down there. Whatever it wasn't legal. That's when I met Ethan, old neighbor, Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm. He worked at a muffler shop a few blocks down. Left a note on my windshield. If you're really Grace, meet me behind the alley, 11 p.m. I showed up and there he was, weathered, watchful. I knew your granddad, he said. Helped him fix the fence in '09. Good man. He told me he'd seen black vans show up weekly, always unloading, always at night. Scott was there every time. It ain't furniture they're hauling, he said. Whatever it is, they lock it in that basement tight. And your sister tells folks you're unstable, that you got combat trauma. That one hurt, but not as much as knowing she was laying the groundwork to make sure nobody would believe me. I recorded Ethan's statement, not for evidence, for my own sanity. By the time I got back to my apartment, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to win this war with emotion. I was going to win it with precision. So I called up Isaac Ung, a former NSA analyst I'd worked with during a 2017 op in Ramstein. The guy lived off Red Bull and bad jazz, but he could trace a stolen Bitcoin wallet across 4 continents in 30 minutes. Grace, he said, if they forged your name and moved federal funds, this isn't a family issue. This is federal. I told him to dig, and I went to work organizing 20 years of emails, hard drives, and digital correspondence. When I say my apartment became a war room, I'm not exaggerating. I turned my kitchen table into a digital command center. 3 laptops, 5 flash drives, a backup server, and a whiteboard I bought from Staples that looked like it belonged in a crime drama. Isaac texted, "Start mapping the shell corp. Follow the money. It always leaks." Monica called in a favor with a contact in property law enforcement. Meanwhile, I started sorting everything I'd saved over the years. Emails from Grandpa, birthday cards, digital voicemails, video files from his old camcorder we used as kids. I didn't know what would help, but I knew one thing for sure. My family underestimated how good I was at finding things people tried to hide. That night, I got a ping from Isaac. He traced Ravenelm Holdings back through 3 layers of shell corporations: Delaware, the Caymans, and finally, a logistics consulting firm registered under the name S. Whitley Holdings, LLC. Guess who the manager was? Scott Whitley, my sister's husband. That's when Monica brought in Kayla, a digital forensics expert she'd worked with on a fraud case involving a non-profit embezzlement scandal. Kayla never showed her face, just a voice on a private call and a green dot that pulsed on screen. I reviewed the signature metadata, Kayla said. They used a layer mask to paste your name onto that deed. I blinked. A what? She explained it in plain English. They didn't forge my name by hand. They lifted it digitally from another document and pasted it into the deed. Then used software to flatten the file so it looked clean. But guess what? She said. They missed one timestamp. File was altered at 3:19 a.m., 2 days after the notary supposedly signed it. That was our first crack in the glass. We knew we needed more. Something physical, something irrefutable. So I went back to Pinehurst Drive. But this time, I wasn't alone. I had Ethan. We parked a block away under a broken street lamp. It was after midnight, cold, quiet. I wore black again, with a camera clipped to my coat collar. Ethan stayed in the truck, watching the street. I moved around the back, through the alley. The basement entrance had a reinforced steel door, which didn't make sense for a residential home unless you were storing something serious. I didn't try to open it. Instead, I did what we used to do on recon overseas. I listened. I found a side vent low to the ground, used a long shotgun mic, slid it in carefully and waited. At first just shuffling, boxes being moved, then muffled voices. One voice was clear. I'd know it anywhere. My father. If that officer finds out, you sever the tie, immediately. No warning. The hair on my arms rose. That voice, measured, gravel-toned, always calm, even when he was handing out the worst punishments of my life. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just a real estate scam. It was a conspiracy, possibly involving federal contracts, because my father. He used to be listed as a consultant for the Department of Defense. That gave him access. And now it looked like he was helping Scott launder money and move unlicensed materials through dummy logistics accounts. I pulled back fast, got in Ethan's truck, didn't say a word. I handed the recorder to Monica the next morning. Her face went pale halfway through playback. "We need to act now," she said. "Not just to stop the fraud, but because whatever's in that basement, it's not supposed to be there." She called the county DA's office. Isaac was already working on a document tree, proving that at least 3 contracts Scott's firm received were awarded using clearance credentials that were, wait for it, mine. They'd stolen my ID tags, my military clearance, my name, and they used it to win money. We filed a motion for emergency injunction. Monica put everything together. Forged deed, financial trail, voice recording, metadata timestamps. 2 days later, we walked up to the front door of the house they stole from me. I wore my uniform. It wasn't for nostalgia. It was strategy. People respect what they can't deny. My sister answered the door, all fake smile and nervous energy. Then she saw Monica. And then she saw the folder. "Ms. Ellison?" Monica said calmly. "You're being served with a court-ordered injunction to freeze all property transactions related to this address." "You can't do this," Allison hissed. "You don't have the right." I stepped forward. "I do. I'm on the original deed." "You're unstable," she snapped. "You've always had issues." That was her angle. Smear the soldier, question the mind. She wanted the judge to see me as unfit, delusional. But what she didn't know is I had already filed my psych evaluations from discharge. Clean, stable, fit for duty. Monica handed her the paperwork. "Try intimidation again, and we'll add harassment." Scott appeared behind her in the hallway. Calm, quiet, fake casual. "You really want to go to war with us?" he asked. "I was trained for war," I said. "You think I'm afraid of 2 real estate cowards and a cargo thief?" He blinked. I could see it. For the first time, he wasn't sure of the outcome. As we walked away, I felt something shift inside me. Not revenge, not even satisfaction, just clarity. They stole from me because they thought I wouldn't fight back, because they saw me as the quiet one, the woman who lived in code, not confrontation. But I'd spent my entire life preparing for this kind of enemy. Just didn't expect them to share my DNA. Real-life comparison moment. There's a real case out of South Carolina from 2019 where a woman returned from active duty to discover her family had forged her name on a quitclaim deed while she was deployed. They sold the house, transferred the title through a shell LLC, and used her bank account to move the funds. She fought back, alone. It took her 19 months, but in the end, she got the house back. And her family? Charged with conspiracy and wire fraud. Sometimes, the battlefield isn't overseas. It's your own backyard. There's a moment in every operation when the mission shifts, when it's no longer just about proving a point, but about holding the line for something bigger. That moment came fast. After the injunction was filed, we expected some blowback. What we didn't expect was how deep the rot went. 2 nights later, I got a text from an unknown number. "You're playing with fire. We have your psych file. Want to see what it says?" It was a threat, a psychological strike meant to shake me. And I'll admit, it worked for a second. Because that meant someone, somewhere, had access to classified archives. My military records were sealed. You don't just stumble into those. That was insider access. Someone was pulling strings. But they picked the wrong vet to rattle. I didn't flinch. I forwarded the message to Isaac and Monica. Isaac replied in minutes. "This isn't just personal. This is criminal." He set up a private secure line. Monica initiated a request for discovery. We needed everything. Text message traces, IP pings, digital footprint logs. And we had to move fast. Meanwhile, I began pulling my own archives. Over the years, I had backed up old hard drives, my military emails, encrypted call logs, photos, even Grandpa's camcorder footage. I found one clip from the night before he passed. It was grainy, time-stamped, but clear enough to make the point. He looked right into the camera and said, "Grace is the only one who ever came back. I want her to have the house." that footage was gold. Not legally binding, maybe, but emotionally powerful. And in court, perception is half the battle. Monica called me 2 days later. Her voice was calm but low. "Grace, we found something. You need to hear this." She patched me into a Zoom with Kayla and Isaac. Both of them had that tone, part curiosity, part dread. Kayla started. "We tracked the wire transfers from Raven Elm Holdings. Some of the payments went through a second entity, Callaway Freight Logistics. Sound familiar?" "Yeah," I said. "That's Scott's company. He uses it for international contracting." "Well," she said, "your father authorized several leases under that company, including one tied to a commercial warehouse 12 miles outside of town." Isaac cut in. "And here's where it gets ugly. That warehouse was listed as a temporary military surplus site. The credentials used to gain that listing? Yours?" I felt like I'd been sucker punched. "My father used my credentials?" I asked. "Yes," Monica said. "He forged your name again, this time on a land use contract. That's federal fraud." And just like that, the conspiracy had a new layer. Now, for those watching who've never had your security clearance stolen, let me paint the picture. It's like someone hijacking your identity. But instead of buying shoes on your credit card, they're committing felony-level crimes under your name. And in my case, it wasn't just about family betrayal anymore. It was about national security. We drafted a new motion, this time not just for real estate fraud, but for conspiracy to commit government contract abuse. The DA's office took it seriously. They issued a sealed investigation order. And then, silence. For 72 hours, nothing. No calls, no emails, no movement. I started to think maybe they'd buried it. That maybe my father had friends in high places. He'd worked for 3 different contractors after retirement. Who knew how deep his Rolodex went? But then, the storm came. It was a Thursday morning when the call came in. FBI, Homeland Security, 2 agents. They wanted to meet. I was at a coffee shop downtown, one of those places where the lattes cost more than gas. They walked in like they owned the room. One of them, Agent Morales, had the kind of stare that could boil water. "Miss Allison," he said, "we've reviewed the material. You were right to bring this forward." He slid a file across the table. Inside, surveillance photos, warehouse footage, evidence that Scott and my father had been using my clearance to secure high-value inventory, including electronic components flagged for military use. "This is bigger than property fraud," Morales said. "We're talking export control violations, possible trafficking." I felt sick. They weren't just stealing a house. They were using my name to move equipment the government didn't even know was missing. That night, I went home, sat on the floor, and stared at my service medals. I'd given this country everything I had. My time, my health, my peace. And somehow, the biggest fight I'd ever face was against my own family. I thought about all the other veterans out there. The ones who come home and get blindsided, not by enemies, but by the people who were supposed to protect them. And I decided something right then. If I was going down this road, I was bringing a spotlight with me. Insert real-life moment here. There's a 2021 case out of Texas. An Air Force tech sergeant whose cousin used his SSN and clearance to apply for defense contracts. The cousin secured $1.8 million in funds. The sergeant didn't find out until he was audited. His credit was ruined. His name flagged. He never even got an apology. The cousin? 5 years in federal prison. Back to my story. We scheduled a court date, preliminary hearing. Scott and Allison's lawyers tried everything. Stall tactics, procedural challenges, mental health claims. They even tried to exclude the camcorder video, saying it was emotionally manipulative. But the judge allowed it in. And then came the twist. As we were wrapping up the evidentiary review, the prosecutor handed me a sealed envelope. Inside, a sworn affidavit from the suspended notary who had signed the fake deed. She confessed, said she'd been paid off, said the paperwork was brought to her after the fact, and she was told it was a minor correction for a family inheritance. The name on the payoff? Richard Ellison, my father. The moment I read my father's name on that affidavit, it felt like time slowed down. Richard Ellison, the same man who taught me how to tie my boots, how to shake hands like I meant it, how to keep my emotions in check, the man who saluted me at my OCS graduation and whispered, "Make the family proud." That same man had paid off a notary to steal my house and forge my name onto documents used for federal fraud. There's betrayal. And then there's this. The prosecutor's team moved fast. With the notary's affidavit in hand, they secured a motion to subpoena the financial records of Callaway Freight Logistics and Raven Elm Holdings. What they found was damning. Multiple midnight wire transfers, all under $10,000, to avoid federal reporting thresholds. A classic structuring pattern used in laundering. All of it tied to Allison's personal bank account, Scott's shell company, and most chilling, my father's consulting accounts. They were moving money, materials, and covering their tracks. And I had been the camouflage. I remember sitting in Monica's office that evening, staring at the stack of evidence. She looked at me and said, "Grace, do you want to go all the way with this?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I was unsure, but because I was angry. So angry it sat in my throat like gravel. "I don't want revenge," I finally said. "I want exposure. I want the truth on record. If they thought they could use me like some kind of digital identity shield, they're about to find out how deep I can dig." The next morning, we got word. The court had issued a temporary freeze on all assets related to the fraud, including the house on Pinehurst Drive. And with the criminal investigation underway, a federal hearing was scheduled within the week. We were finally heading into battle. The day of the hearing, I showed up early. Uniform pressed, ribbons sharp. Not for them, for me. Because the woman walking into that courtroom wasn't the daughter they dismissed. She was a soldier who'd spent decades chasing invisible threats. And now she was facing the most personal one of her life. Allison sat at the defense table looking smug, but her eyes flickered the second I entered. She knew. The tide had turned. Scott sat rigid beside her, whispering frantically to his attorney. My father didn't look at me at all, just stared straight ahead, like this was a board meeting, and not the unraveling of everything he'd built on lies. The judge entered. Federal Circuit. No nonsense. The kind of man who didn't blink twice at classified cases. He listened to opening statements, then turned it over to the prosecution. Colonel Ellison, the attorney said, can you explain how your name came to appear on this deed? I stood up, looked the judge in the eye, and said, I didn't sign it. I was in Germany, at a secure military installation, the day that document was filed. The signature is forged. The notary who signed it admitted to being paid off, and the transfer was used to move property into a shell company run by my sister's husband. The judge nodded. And the funds? Traced through multiple accounts, structured payments, laundered through a logistics company that used my military clearance to win contracts they were never qualified to bid on. Is this a case of mistaken identity? No, Your Honor. This is a case of stolen identity, with full intent to defraud. Then came the evidence. Monica walked the court through each piece. The falsified notary log, the altered metadata on the deed file, the camcorder footage of my grandfather, the wire transfer trail, the voice recording of my father giving the order to sever the tie. When that last piece played, you could hear a pin drop in the courtroom. And for the first time, my father blinked. The defense tried to pivot. She's unstable, their lawyer argued. Has a history of PTSD. Maybe imagined half of this. Classic smear play. But Monica was ready. She produced my psych evaluations, cleared, no flags, fit for duty. Then she played one final card. A sealed letter from my former commanding officer describing my record, my character, and my clearance level. The letter ended with, if Colonel Ellison says something happened, it happened. And if you ignore her, you do so at your own peril. That sealed it. The judge ordered all properties frozen pending full investigation. But then, unexpectedly, he added, given the weight of evidence, the nature of the falsified documents, and the potential risk to federal operations, this case is being referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office for Criminal Prosecution. You could feel the oxygen leave the room. Afterward, outside the courthouse, I didn't say a word to Allison or Scott. I didn't need to. But as I was walking to the car, a man in his 70s, clearly a veteran, stopped me. He wore a faded Korean war cap and held a coffee in one hand. You made us proud in there, he said. They forgot we don't stay erased. I nodded. No, sir, we don't. Insert real-life reference. In 2020, a similar case made headlines in Colorado, where a retired Army colonel exposed a multi-million-dollar fraud ring being run through a family-owned logistics firm. He noticed funds were missing from his military pension account, only to discover his nephew had stolen his credentials and used them to falsify military delivery contracts. The colonel's testimony brought down 3 companies and led to 12 indictments. Sometimes, the biggest battles come after the uniform's put away. Later that night, back at my apartment, I sat down and wrote a letter to myself. I know that sounds weird, but I needed to put it in writing. I wrote, they tried to use your silence against you. They tried to weaponize your loyalty. But you showed up. You told the truth. And now they have to live with it. I folded that letter and tucked it into my discharge folder. Because some battles, you win just by standing tall. After the hearing, things moved quickly. Federal prosecutors opened an official case file. Homeland Security agents subpoenaed every financial document tied to Raven Elm Holdings and Callaway Freight. The Department of Defense flagged the stolen credentials tied to my name, and the FBI began backtracking every contract Scott's company ever touched. It wasn't just about one house anymore. It was about fraud, national security violations, and the kind of quiet corruption that festers when no one's watching. But I was watching now. The house on Pinehurst Drive was locked down under federal order. No one could sell it, lease it, or touch the assets until the investigation closed. I'll never forget the day Monica and I walked through the front gates again. No more sneaking around alleys. No more late-night stakeouts. This time, I walked up the drive in uniform. I didn't wear it to show off. I wore it because it reminded me who I was before they tried to bury me under forged paperwork. The Lexus was in the driveway. So was Scott's black SUV. They were still inside. Probably thought they could lawyer their way out of everything. But when I rang the doorbell and Allison opened it, her expression cracked. She saw the court packet in Monica's hand and knew it was real. "We're here to serve you," Monica said evenly. "Court injunction. All property transfers are frozen. All financial activity tied to this address is under review." "This is harassment," Allison hissed. "This is our house." "No," I said quietly. "It was mine until you rewrote history with a stolen pen." Scott stepped forward, fake calm, all charm and smugness. "You really want to go down this road, Grace?" he said. "I've walked worse roads in a war zone," I said. "This one? I know where it ends, and it's not good for you." He tried one last jab. "You're unstable." I smiled, evaluated, cleared, filed with the court. "But you? You're about to be evaluated by federal agents. Let me know how that goes." We turned and walked away, but not before I saw it. The fear in Allison's eyes, the realization that the plan had failed, that I wasn't just a name on paper. I was the storm they didn't see coming. Now, if you're wondering what happened next, it was a waiting game. Court cases don't move like Hollywood movies. There's no montage, no dramatic reveal, just paperwork, subpoenas, hearings, and a mountain of evidence. But behind the scenes, the wheels were turning. Isaac found a pattern in the contract approvals. Scott's company had submitted identical bids, right down to formatting, to 3 separate federal contractors. All of them signed off using my old clearance ID. It was textbook fraud. Kayla located offshore transfers, moving funds to a dummy account in Belize. That account was linked to a trust set up under a false identity that had been used before. By my father. He wasn't just complicit. He was leading it. And every move they made using pieces of my life. My ID, my name, my service record. But the final blow came from an unexpected place. The county utilities office. Remember those power spikes we found at the house? Monica filed a FOIA request and pulled 18 months of energy logs. The spikes happened every 2 weeks on the dot. Always between 2 and 4 a.m., and always followed by large vehicle movement from the alley out back. We cross-referenced those logs with street cam footage. City run, low resolution, but clear enough. Same 2 black vans, no license plates, loading heavy crates. Homeland Security matched the van model to a contractor known for unregulated shipments. They flagged the operation as a potential illegal export ring. That's when the arrests started. First came Scott, then the suspended notary, who flipped immediately, then Allison, and finally, my father. They didn't fight the charges in open court. Too much evidence, too many digital fingerprints. But they tried to bargain, tried to blame each other. Scott said he was just following orders. Allison said she didn't understand the paperwork. My father claimed he was trying to protect family assets. Funny. For people so obsessed with protecting the family, they sure had no problem trying to destroy me. The day of the sentencing hearing, I showed up early. Again, in uniform. I didn't speak to the press waiting outside. I didn't even look at my family across the courtroom. I just sat there, calm, steady, present. The judge listed the charges: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, forgery of federal documents, identity theft, abuse of military clearance credentials, intentional misrepresentation on government contracts. Allison, 6 years. Scott, 8 years. Richard Ellison, my father, 10 years, no parole. And when the gavel came down, there was no shouting, no chaos, just silence. The sound of justice landing. Outside the courtroom, a few veterans waited. Some I didn't know, some I had never met. One of them, an older man with a cane, reached out to shake my hand. "Colonel Ellison," he said, "you reminded them we still stand, no matter how long they try to erase us." I nodded. Because that's the thing no one tells you about people who serve. We don't quit. Even when the enemy is family. Even when the battlefield is a courtroom. Insert real-life anchor. According to the VA, over 16,000 veterans have reported financial abuse or fraud involving family members since 2015. Most of them never make it to court. Most don't have the resources or support to fight back. But if even one person hears this and decides not to stay silent, then this fight wasn't just for me. Back home, I opened the front door of the Pinehurst house again. The lights were still flickering. The porch still smelled like old hydrangeas. But something had changed. Not the walls. Me. I didn't reclaim the house out of nostalgia. I reclaimed it because it was mine. Because justice matters. Because truth matters. And because some stories need to be written back in. The days after the sentencing felt quiet. Not the kind of peace you celebrate with champagne, but the kind that settles deep in your bones. The kind that comes after a storm clears and you're still standing. I moved back into the Pinehurst house. Not forever, but long enough to walk every room, touch the walls, and remember what it felt like before everything got twisted. My boots echoed on the same hardwood floors I used to play toy soldiers on. I found one of Grandpa's old fishing hats still hanging in the garage, untouched. And I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I had survived something most people don't even talk about. Family betrayal that doesn't just hurt feelings. It rewrites your identity. I had the locks changed, of course. Scrubbed the house, top to bottom. Even replaced the porch light, the one that used to flicker like a half-hearted welcome sign. Now it stayed steady. Warm. The basement, though? That was a different story. Federal agents had sealed it off. Evidence chain stickers lined the door. I never went down there again. What they were doing, whatever they had stored, it wasn't just illegal. It was dangerous. One wrong move and That house could have been at the center of something catastrophic. I still don't know exactly what it was. I'm not sure I want to. But I know this. They used my name, my rank, and my silence. And they'll never get the chance again. A few weeks later, I got an invitation in the mail from the Department of Defense. A ceremony. Apparently, someone had submitted a nomination on my behalf, probably Monica or Isaac, for a Distinguished Service Recognition Award. I almost didn't go. Not because I didn't care, but because I was exhausted. But then I remembered what Ethan said. He reminded them, we don't stay erased. So I went. The ceremony was small, quiet, held in a federal building with a stone floor and a smell of fresh polish and old paper. When they called my name, Colonel Grace Ellison, I walked to the podium, every step weighted with everything I'd been through. The applause wasn't loud, but it was real. And for the first time since the day I came home and was told I didn't belong, I felt like I did. Afterward, I stopped by the Defense Service Library. There's a wall there, black granite, polished so clean you can see your reflection in it. It lists the names of decorated officers, those who served behind the scenes in cyber command and intelligence. I ran my hand over the carved letters. Colonel Grace Ellison, U.S. Cyber Command, 1998-2023. No one could take that from me. Not Allison, not Scott, not even my own father. Final personal reflection? You know, people assume betrayal has a sound, a slam, a scream, a courtroom outburst. But real betrayal? It's quieter than you think. It's a signature you didn't write, a house that's not yours anymore, a text message designed to break you. But here's what they forget. When you're trained to survive war, you don't back down just because the battlefield changes. You adapt. You fight smart. You gather intel and wait for your moment. That's what I did. And in the end, I didn't just win back a house. I reclaimed something far more important. My name. My honor. My place in the world. Here's what I want you to remember. You are not crazy for standing up for yourself. You are not unstable for calling out abuse, especially when it's coming from people you once trusted with your life. And you are not weak for fighting for your truth, even when it feels like you're doing it alone. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Forgiveness means taking your power back on your own terms. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever been betrayed, disowned, underestimated, or told you were too damaged to be believed, then you're not alone. Drop a comment below. Share your story. And if you're still standing after everything they tried to take from you, click that like button so they know you're still here. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories about strength, survival, and silent victories. Because we don't stay erased, we rise, and we write ourselves back in.